Welcome everyone to another post-playthrough thoughts and review video. It's been a while since I was able to put one of these out, hasn't it? Well, since it's been a while, allow me to remind you guys how this style of review works. There will be no score at the end of this video. Instead, I'll be talking about the game I played, what I thought about it, and my history and personal experiences with the franchise. I'm going to try to keep spoilers to a minimum, and by that I mean I won't be showing any footage of boss fights or late game cutscenes. However, I don't want you assuming there's going to be absolutely no spoilers in this review, so watch out for that. I may be late to the party, but I finally completed my first ever playthrough of The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. It was certainly very different from other Zelda games, so how did I feel about it? Here are my thoughts. I've actually already been over my thoughts on the Legend of Zelda series, since Breath of the Wild isn't the first Zelda game I've played on stream, but I'll recap them very quickly here anyway. Back in the summer, I played through Wind Waker, reminding me how much I adore the Zelda franchise. Now that I've actually played Breath of the Wild finally, I've once again played through every 3D Zelda game, as well as most of the 2D games. I've loved every single Zelda game I've ever played, and the franchise holds a very special place in my heart. So why didn't I play Breath of the Wild when it first came out? Well, to be honest, I really can't remember. The game came out in early 2017, and if memory serves me right, there were two factors contributing to that. Firstly, I just didn't have that much money to spend on games at the time. I didn't have a Switch, but I would have been willing to pick up the Wii U version, if that financial barrier hadn't been in the way. Secondly, I just started playing League of Legends the summer before, and I was heavily invested in learning that game and improving myself. So somehow, Breath of the Wild just never got picked up. Quite frankly, I don't regret it. Delaying that purchase ultimately meant I could get the Switch version instead, and experience the game with all of you. The only thing I knew about Breath of the Wild going into it was that it's a non-linear, open-world game. And yet, I wasn't at all concerned with how different it is. Zelda is one of my favorite franchises of all time, but over the years it's encompassed many different styles. And though the 2D and 3D games still followed the same general formula, I had complete faith that Breath of the Wild could pull off something different. Was my faith correctly placed? I came into Breath of the Wild as unspoiled as you can possibly be, which is impressive for a main series Zelda game that had been out for over a year. I hadn't even heard the game's soundtrack, much less heard any plot details or anything about the characters. And when I listened to the title theme for the first time before the start of my first Breath stream, I legitimately teared up. Breath of the Wild is often a quiet game with no overworld theme, opting instead for occasional music cues as you venture through this new open-ended incarnation of Hyrule. But all of the town themes are genuinely charming, especially Rito Village, calling back to my absolute favorite song in Wind Waker, Dragon Roost Island. Combat themes are energetic and some tense, and finally the endgame Hyrule Castle music is immensely powerful and full of symbolism, with parallel sections of the indoor and outdoor themes calling to both Link's and Zelda's roles in facing Ganon. The soundtrack emphasized the better moments of the game, and I know I'll be listening to this one for years to come. I'm really glad I never listened to the music from this game before playing it, because going in blind made the impact of the music that much more magical. But as good as the music is, it doesn't have much of an impact without the visuals, which are phenomenal. This footage should speak for itself, and it's even downscaled from the original resolution. This game appears as though it blends the visual styles of Skyward Sword and Wind Waker. Add the new lighting, and this game is perhaps the most visually striking game in the franchise, in my opinion. This game has incredibly diverse locales, from snowy tundras to vast deserts, to great mountains and sprawling grasslands. And I've only scratched the surface on what you can find in this game. Climbing a mountain only to be greeted by a magnificent sunset, or perhaps an ominous blood moon, were moments that brought so much joy, or perhaps fear despite the beauty in the case of the blood moon. I also want to point out Zora's Domain in its best incarnation in the series, which was absolutely stunning to look at. Speaking of the map, the names of some of these areas were fun little throwbacks to other places and characters in Zelda's history. This didn't have much of an impact on the game, but it still made me smile as a longtime fan of the franchise. And if you're a longtime Zelda fan, the voice acting should immediately stand out. This game isn't fully voice acted, but all major characters and cutscenes are fully voiced, except for Link himself. And I thought it was done really well. I've heard some complaints about Zelda's voice, and yeah, in retrospect, I suppose she kind of sounds like me attempting to do an accent poorly. But that didn't distract from my experience at all. Speaking of the major characters, I loved them all. The champions were exceptionally likable, and characters like Cass and Sidon were a blast to talk to. Even some of the minor characters like Pikango made me smile. You have no explicit companion this time around, but all of the major characters you meet in your journey certainly fill that role quite well. Unfortunately, with a world this size, there's plenty of minor characters who are virtually irrelevant and unmemorable, but once again, the important players in this story are so exceptionally good that I'd argue it doesn't matter. Breath of the Wild's gameplay format is completely different than all other Zelda games, excepting perhaps the original. Within the first 3 hours of gameplay, you're given most of your major quest lines that will take you through most of your gameplay. Recover Link's lost memories, free the Divine Beasts, and destroy Ganon. In fact, nothing's stopping you from just wandering right up to Ganon as soon as you leave the tutorial area if that's what you want. But you'd miss out on a fantastic game if you do. Once you have a general idea of what to do, the entire world opens up to you. Want to gather all the memories right away? Go for it. Just want to complete the map and gather mushrooms? Sure, why not? Breath of the Wild offers so many ways to experience the game your own way, which is very interesting to me. For example, on my playthrough, I assumed that I should be looking for all my memories to start. By exploring the map, I discovered lots of neat little things to do, like gathering dragon scales. After a while, I realized how hard it would be to find the memories without knowing the whole map of Hyrule. And then I stumbled across my first Divine Beast, forgetting that I could, pull up its location on the map. And that changed the entire focus of my playthrough. One thing that might be a little jarring to those expecting a more traditional Zelda experience is everything about your inventory. Traditional items are replaced by runes, special powers that are all obtained during the tutorial. You have 3 classes of weapons, one-handed, two-handed, and spears, all with their own fighting styles and charge attacks, including the traditional spin attack. And every single weapon in the game can break. Bows are as abundant as the other types of weapons, and boomerangs can be swung like swords. You can throw most items, allowing you to use spears as javelins, as well as allowing for better controls for when you find a rod, returning from older games. You can also obtain more than just tunics. Helms, shirts, and pants are all available with different effects and stats. And there's a lot more numbers this time around. With time, I came to greatly appreciate the variety this system has to offer. Dungeons are also gone, replaced by shrines and divine beasts. The former make up the majority of your progression-based discoveries, presenting small challenges, either a puzzle or a fight, like a single dungeon element in isolation. These grant spirit orbs as a reward, which can be combined to grant a heart container or a stamina vessel to improve Link's abilities. I still don't know how to feel about the shrines, to be honest. While many of them were fun to solve, I felt a bit empty when all I was doing was completing shrines back to back. They're pretty good for the most part, but they feel lightly unfulfilling to me. Divine Beasts, however, are much more like a traditional dungeon. There's only 4 in the game, each ending the plotline of one of the 4 champions. In each, you need to solve puzzles to reach 5 terminals before taking on a boss at the end. This style of challenge felt much more rewarding, given the plot implications of completing one, and the tangible rewards of new powers immediately upon completion. I don't want to spoil too much about each champion's story, given that these were the best parts of the game to me. But I will say that the Divine Beasts make an excellent conclusion to each, pushing you towards your ultimate goal of defeating Ganon. Towers dot the landscape of Hyrule, granting you a portion of the map for each one you climb. Of course, this means you have to venture into uncharted territory each time you want to obtain one, which gets kind of exciting. The towers are tall enough, however, that they can usually be seen from afar, so you know generally where to go. Some are harder to climb than others, requiring a creative approach to actually reach, or to ensure you can reach the top. However, you can prepare in advance such that you can continually refill your stamina, reaching the top before you could naturally do so. It's this level of creativity that makes Breath of the Wild such a cool game to me. Both towers and shrines become fast travel points as well, making the massive map of Hyrule much easier to traverse. As a side note, climbing in general felt so liberating. Opening up the verticality of the world for exploration made it feel that much bigger, and allowed for some really creative approaches to situations, making it a super valuable addition to the game in my eyes. As another quick side note, the weather and environmental effects in this game were awesome. While rain was quite frustrating as it restricts your climbing ability, electricity actually behaved as expected in real life, meaning you could lure someone into a puddle and fire a shock arrow into it. You can't use wood in extreme heat, and for the love of God, don't pull out a bomb arrow either. And you can't use metal in thunderstorms. These effects added another layer to your approach to any given situation, which was so cool to me. Clearly, the game differs greatly from other games in the series, and it does so well such that I did not feel alienated as a longtime fan. However, This comes with some Displaced Expectations, and this brings about my biggest complaint with Breath of the Wild. The early game is absolutely brutal. Much like Super Mario Odyssey, this game greatly rewards skill. If you're good enough at the game, you can do incredible things. I was able to complete a major test of Strength Shrine within my first 10 hours of gameplay, without good enough weapons to do so easily. However, you can't be good enough at the game right away due to some unfamiliar controls. Y is the attack button, not B, which is now a dedicated sprint button. You also have a jump button on X, which is a series first, so this controls your typical flips and hops instead of your A button, which is now a shield swing. On top of that, there's a lot of advanced mechanics to master, which I'll mention in a moment. This is disorienting at first for Zelda veterans, but inherently isn't a problem. But knowing how difficult it is to be good at the game on first picking it up makes your pitifully weak state in the early game crippling. Maybe Link's muscles have atrophied from 100 years of sleep or something, but you can barely take a hit and you deal very little damage when you start due to the gear system. As soon as you leave the Great Plateau, it's not hard to take a bad turn and encounter an enemy who can easily dominate you. This can still happen in the mid-game, by the way, when you encounter your first Lionel or Guardian. Since you only have 3 hearts and no armor and terrible weapons, your first few hours in this open-world Hyrule may be absolutely vicious, making it easily the most frustrating part of the experience in my opinion, especially if you didn't expect such a brutal early game. However, once you actually get good, you start to notice just how involved this game's combat can be. Even with the best armor and weapons, there are some situations where if you're not paying attention, you can easily get swarmed by groups of enemies, where it would take a lot of skill to fend them all off. But it's technically doable. You can approach a situation via stealth, which I love, or you could get into a firefight with an enemy archer. The new Flurry Rush mechanic rewards frame-perfect dodges with an opportunity for free damage, rewarding skilled play. Furthermore, having access to jumps opens up opportunities for animation cancels. You can cancel your swing or bow shot with a quick hop, allowing you to go for riskier plays. This combat system is honestly better than even Twilight Princess's in my opinion. It's just so much fun to use. Throughout all of this, you might actually forget about side quests. There's just so much to do in this game. I actually didn't complete many of the side quests, but most of those that I did complete were underwhelming. There were quests like kill X bokoblins or gather Y luminous stones and the like, the rewards for which were sometimes worth it and other times just not at all. I wasn't a huge fan of the side quests this time around, but side quests also weren't the focus of my playthrough. I didn't play many, so take that opinion with a grain of salt. And as if all of that wasn't enough, Breath of the Wild got 2 DLC packs after launch, the Master Trials and the Champions Ballad. While both have minor side quests attached granting you new clothing, I didn't complete those and thus I can't comment on them. The main content of each, however, is accessible only after completing major moments in the game. The Master Trials after obtaining a Master Sword, and the Champions Ballad after completing all 4 Divine Beasts. I'll talk about them in order of my own completion. The Champions Ballad is a very narrative-driven pack, refining the stories of each champion by presenting you with the trials each had to overcome before the Great Calamity. First, you must undergo a series of combat trials in the Great Plateau where you one-shot every enemy, but you're locked at a quarter heart. After that, 4 monuments appear across the map, each presenting you with 3 puzzles similar to the memories, leading to some of the coolest shrines in the game, and a boss fight, which you must challenge under very specific conditions. This pack was very rewarding to complete. I loved finding the trials, since exploration is one of my favorite aspects of the game. The process of completing these shrines never felt as monotonous as those from the base game, since they were contextualized in narrative, and I loved the chance to see more from the champions and from Cass. I'd recommend this pack to any fan of the base game. However, the opening was intense because I didn't expect it to be so challenging, not realizing at first that this was meant to be late-game DLC. The Master Trials, however, is not for everyone. I can compare this to the Cave of Ordeals from Twilight Princess. You are presented with a series of trials which you must start with no equipment. It's as though you're back in the early game, albeit with more hearts and stamina. You must kill every enemy in the room before moving on to the next, with a few rest areas filled with weapons, armor, food, and arrows in between. There are 3 sets of trials, and these can get extremely punishing. You're very vulnerable, but fortunately by this point of the game you should be more skilled, so it's not nearly as awful an experience as the early game. Unfortunately, a single death forces you to restart the trial from the beginning, and the last set of trials is long, taking me roughly 4 hours for 3 attempts. I can tell casual fans of the game will not have as much fun with this pack, but for people like me who love pushing themselves, the Master Trials is a lot of fun, provided you can keep a clear head and not get too frustrated at your mistakes. If I could only pick one pack of the 2 though, I'd take the Champions Ballad any day. So that's the gist of Breath of the Wild, an experience that became absolutely magical after some initial frustrations. I used to try to rank my favorite Zelda games, but nowadays I don't feel that's right. Breath of the Wild was a very different game, one that doesn't fit the typical Zelda formula in the least, yet still clearly a Zelda game, and one I enjoyed quite a lot. You have to go into this game with a slightly different mindset and play expecting a difficult early game, but as you grow in strength, you can achieve feats you thought impossible and experience a phenomenal adventure. You truly feel as though you grow as a hero alongside Link. So it should be pretty clear at this point that Breath of the Wild has my recommendation. The game's also made me very interested in the direction of the next Zelda game. Will it be open world again? Will it go back to the old formula? Or will it be something completely different yet again? Breath of the Wild was a breath of fresh air and reminded me how much I love this franchise. I absolutely won't wait another year after the next Zelda game's launch to play it. I want to thank all of you for watching this video, and if you play the game for yourself, I hope your playthrough is just as enjoyable as mine was. What were your thoughts on the game? Did you disagree with anything I said? If so, I'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. If this is the first you've seen of my content, you can find me at twitch.tv/turkeysub23. And to those of you who joined me during my 23 Breath of the Wild streams, thank you so much for sharing this adventure with me. Have a wonderful day, take care, and always remember, Mifa is best girl.